And it says up there on the top. I'm gonna hit
Yeah.
and let's start the webinar. All right. Now it gives, it never used to give this little extra button. Now it gives the let's get this started button. Before we didn't used to have that. We have a notorious story about somebody pressing the start button when we weren't ready and us going live ahead of time. So it was a little nerve-wracking. All right, so let's click. All right, we're gonna go live. All right, here we go. So started, and then we just wait. Here we go, people coming in. All right. There we go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. All right. See some of our people that registered are just coming in. So welcome, everyone. All right, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to the MassMEP webinar event this morning. And this is, are these buzzwords or real problems? Supply chain and reshoring. Our panelists that we have with us this morning, I think are first-time panelists with us. From Business Improvement Group, we have Mr. Josh Shernan and Mr. John Malone. They will be doing the presentation this morning for everyone. And from our MassMEP team, we have with us Emma Mailman, our marketing coordinator. We have Mike Herbert. He is our program development manager, and he is also known as our point of contact for the event. And last, definitely not least, is Miss Lisa Derby Oden. She is our grant program manager. So you will hear from both Lisa and Mike this morning, as well as they will be presenting at the end of the presentation. I'm Haley Steele. I'm the marketing manager with MassMEP. I'm the moderator for the webinar, and we want to thank you all for joining us this morning. As you can see, we are in the webinar format, so the mics are all muted, but there are plenty of ways that you can engage with us this morning. If you will note down on your bottom ribbon, you will see there is a chat bubble and there's Q&A, which is two bubbles laying on top of each other. If you have your screen squeezed in real tight, you will have to click on the more, which is the three dots, and that will open up and you'll be able to see the chat and the Q&A bubble. In the Q&A, that is your question and answer. That will be open the entire duration of the webinar this morning. We encourage you to put any of your questions in there. We like to say that if you have a question, more than likely somebody else within the audience has a very similar question. So we strongly encourage you to put your questions in there so that Josh and John are able to answer those questions along with the content this morning. Now, the chat bubble, we recommend that that's something, if you have something specific, maybe that you want to talk to John and Josh regarding, or maybe something with MassMEP with either Mike or Lisa, go ahead and pop that in there, and you can make that a little bit more of a private conversation just between you and the other individual within the chat. We do have an hour set aside for the webinar today. We feel it's plenty of time for the content and the Q&A. We will be respectful of our panelists and also of your time. So if for some reason we begin to run over, we will end the webinar as scheduled, but you all registered with an email address. So we will be sure to answer your questions and send them back to you through that email address you provided in your registration. The webinar is also being streamed on Facebook. It is also being recorded. So we use these for our internal purposes and also out live on Facebook, as we like to call that, our own little DVR system. If there is someone that you feel would be beneficial to watch this webinar, there's information in here you think would be pertinent to them and they weren't able to make it today, This video will live on our Facebook page. You can go to the MassMEP Facebook and you'll be able to find it under our video link. So it stays there for the longevity of the video. So we encourage you to send that link over to someone else. You will all receive that in an email as well, for those of you that are in attendance and for anybody that may have missed it. So that's my spiel. I'm sticking to it. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Josh, and we will begin with, are these buzzwords a real problem, supply chain and reshoring? Josh.
Thank you, Haley, and thank you to MassMEP for sponsoring this webinar. I'm Josh Chernin. My colleague John Malone will be monitoring the Q&A for me, and I'm going to share my screen now, and hopefully the gods of technology will be good to us. Does everyone see my screen? I'm trying to go full screen here. Does everyone see it?
Yep, perfect, Josh.
All right, good. So here is our agenda for today. It's really about supply chain management, and there are 4 topics. Taking risk out of the supply chain, demand management to help manage your supply chain, reshoring issues, and then how MassMEP and Business Improvement Group can help you. So what is de-risking? It's about reducing the risk of a lack of supply or stockouts, but not by going back to the old ways of just having a ton of stuff on your shelves. That's 30 years ago. It doesn't work anymore. No one can afford it. So what do? Well, you start by looking through your supply chain. And here's a very simple example. You have 3 suppliers of an important component. So you're fine. If one of them goes out of business or their factory blows up, you've got 2 other suppliers, you're in good shape. Let's go one level deeper. Now, this is a problem because it turns out that all 3 of your suppliers are sourcing a critical subcomponent from a single supplier. That's a problem, potentially. And that's where you really have to look. Is it a problem? It depends. It depends, for instance, does that supplier have more than one location? Are there duplicate parts available in the market? It may be a problem, it may not be a problem, but it certainly indicates an area that you ought to be looking at more closely. And this is what you have to do, layer by layer in the supply chain. You need to look through for these kinds of problems, and it takes a lot of work and you have to ask a lot of questions, but that's the basic idea. So what do? You look through your supply chain, and you may have to look pretty deep. It depends on who you are and what you're doing and who your suppliers are, but you may have to look 3, 4, 5 levels deep to find single suppliers, unreliable suppliers, and other kinds of risks. And that does take some work, and you have to ask some questions. When you find the risk, obviously, you focused on the highest risk first. Now, the highest doesn't necessarily mean the most expensive. It could be a $2 component, but without it, you can't make your product. So by risk, I really mean risk to you, the risk of not being able to deliver to your customer. You can help your suppliers find another sub-supplier. You can build inventory, and I want to be careful here because we're not talking about inventories of finished goods. We're talking about maybe an extra bit of inventory of the one part that's at risk. Remember this little red dot here? Maybe you might want to ask those 3 suppliers in blue to hold a little bit extra. And maybe you would favor the ones who are willing to do that. So I'm not talking about bulking up every bit of inventory at every stage of the supply chain. And I'm certainly not talking about building an inventory of finished goods, because those are the most expensive. Just that one component. You can try to find a substitute. You can also either own or buy your own intellectual property. So as an example, if you've participated in the design of a circuit of some kind with a supplier, who owns that design? Are you at liberty to take that design to another supplier if that first supplier gets into trouble, or does that first supplier own it? Another really simple example, and this is not really a critical one, but it'll serve to make the point. A lot of people order boxes, and a lot of those boxes are printed with your logo. Well, who owns the artwork? And if your box supplier falls behind, are you at liberty to tell that supplier, listen, I own the artwork and I want you to send it to box supplier B so they can make my inventory? So figuring out who owns the intellectual property through the supply chain is a pretty important component. Here are some other de-risking components. Auditing suppliers, you can do it formally or informally. In some industries like medical or aerospace, your customers may require it. You can do what's called supplier development, which is essentially consulting with your supplier. You can do it or make it yourself if that's possible, but usually there's a reason why you didn't in the first place. Work very hard on the specifications. Now, this is something that kind of comes up front, but make sure that your specifications are good so that if you need to find a new supplier really fast, you can give them a good idea of what you want. You can decide whether you want a contractual relationship or a spot relationship with your supplier. And you can use and report key performance indicators, metrics, through the supply chain so that your suppliers know how they're doing to help you. Here is a trap that I see all the time. You've designed something. It works. You buy it from a supplier, but you spec'd in only that supplier. So if that supplier gets into trouble, you can't find another one because now your customer has spec'd in that same supplier. You said, I'm going to use widget 1234A from the Smith Company, and your customer has written that into their specifications, which is a contractual relationship between them and you. And even if there is a second supplier of a duplicate component out there, you can't switch. And you can't switch until you talk with your customer and get them to change the specs, and that can be really difficult. So word to the wise about getting ahead of this is try to spec more than one supplier in at the beginning, or at least say we will use supplier A unless they get into trouble, and then we can use supplier B. And lastly, make sure your information systems are working for you. The primary information system that you'll use in supply chain de-risking is called an MRP, stands for Material Resource Planning. These days, most ERP systems have an MRP built into them. They used to be separate, but that was years ago. Now they're basically the same. They're integrated. And what they do is they help you plan your inventory by working backwards for the most part. You say, I have this order, it's due on September 1st. It's going to take me 2 weeks to do production. Therefore, I need all my parts on August 15th. The longest lead time is a month. I better order that today. And it'll help you organize all that information. It may even automatically cut purchase orders. I could talk for an hour on MRPs alone, and I won't. But if you're not using an MRP system, you're really cheating yourself of the ability to replace inventory with information. Okay, let's talk about demand management. Now, why are we talking about demand management when we're talking about supply chain? Well, upsets in the supply chain are often caused by upsets in demand, and we've got some great examples right now, right in front of us in the economy. The price of lumber skyrocketed recently. It's since come down. The price of cars, especially used cars, has gone way up. All kinds of things have gotten more expensive. And the reason is that supply chains are out of whack and they couldn't adjust fast enough. They couldn't adjust to the demand quickly enough. So we're going to talk for a few minutes about how to manage the demand side of it so that it doesn't whiplash your supply chain. To start with, this is not easy, but start by asking your customers, okay? And don't ask the purchasing people because they won't know. They may have been handed an answer, but they won't know the numbers behind that answer. You need to talk with the sales or the marketing folks or the operations folks in some companies and ask for hard data. If they say we're going to order 100,000 in the next quarter, ask them, how do they know that? And lots of times, you'll get these blank stares because people are picking numbers out of the air. And that's the time to really push them. Is your demand historically accurate? Is it seasonal? Is it cyclical? What makes you say that you're going to order 100,000 of these things? Do your own independent research. Ask the people who sell your customers' products. They may be retailers, they may be wholesalers, they may be distributors. You can compare notes with friendly competitors. A lot of people have friendly competitors. It's worth talking to them because sometimes it can benefit both of you. And there are various sales forecasting and models. I don't think much of them, but I'll mention it because they are out there. Second part is understanding your own capacity. And this can get tricky because you can measure it in many different ways. They may not be the same. Machine capacity, labor capacity, space capacity, seasonality, and how do you factor in productivity increases? You may be constrained in one of these areas, but not in others. You may be able to increase capacity. We'll talk a little bit about that. But the point is that it's hard to manage demand if you don't know what your capacity is to begin with. And then look for the gap. Where is the gap, or where are the constraints? Productivity is by far the healthiest way to increase capacity. And the healthiest way to do that is called process improvement. And by process improvement, I mean improving a process, taking steps out of the process and making the remaining steps stronger and simpler. And if you do that right, both your productivity and your quality will go up together. The old myth of the trade-off between productivity and quality really is a myth if you do process improvement properly. And I could talk for hours about that, but I won't. I'll leave it at that. Can you be more flexible with your labor hours? Can you hire part-timers, retirees, moms who want to work mom's hours, temps? Can you monkey around with your vacation policy? Can you run more, fewer shifts? Can you create space by moving machines together or creating cells? And can you structure your labor hours so that you have some capacity in there? Now, in a plant that I used to run, where our demand was quite spiky and relatively difficult to determine on a day-to-day basis, but we had a pretty good handle on it over a month. We aim to have between 8 and 10% overtime. Why do we do that? Well, First of all, if you have 10% overtime, then for every 10 people you have in your plant, that's one you don't need to hire. Secondly, a lot of employees see overtime as essentially a benefit. And there's some pros and cons to that. I'm not saying that's always a good thing, but a lot of employees do want to work some overtime. So it's good to have it there. And the nice thing about limiting it to 8 or 10% is that you can often go to 20% in the short term. 20% is essentially 6 days a week. And that's a pretty good surge capacity that you can turn on and off very quickly. So if you limit your overtime to somewhere around, 5 or 10%, enough so that you have some, but not so much that you can't increase it if you need to, that seems to be a pretty good balance. And I've always felt, and I feel even more strongly now than in the past with the labor markets and the difficulties everyone's having with labor markets, that hiring good employees is harder than selling. So if you see an opportunity to hire someone good, even if you don't necessarily need that person right now, if you can afford it, it might be worth it. Can you adjust pricing? Now, that's easier said than done. It's easier to do for services. There's a history there of prices generally moving up, not down, for everything from legal services to haircuts. It's harder to do it with products. If your customers are used to buying your widget for $99.99 each, and you suddenly raise the price to $109 because you've got a demand, your loyal customers are probably going to ask questions. So it's harder to do, but in some cases you can. You may be able to monkey around with volume pricing or volume discounts, shave that a little bit, but it's something to consider. Can you lock in more predictable demand with long-term contracts? Can you get your customers to agree, for instance, to buy 100 widgets over the course of the year without necessarily specifying we're going to buy 8 in January and 9 in February or whatever. But just to know that it's there and that they're required to take it by the end of the year will help you with the next bullet, which is, can you produce early? Because you may have times when demand is down, and that's the time perhaps to fill the demand that you know is coming because these customers have signed contracts with you. Or if you're a seasonal business, can you level load your year a little bit? A lot of companies do that. They'll produce in August and September for the Christmas season, just as one example. But the point is, trying to level load your demand will make it much easier to avoid the bullwhip of supply chain disruptions. And I've even seen cases where companies will trade work or machine time with friendly competitors. It happens more often than you think, and it's worth it to maintain good relationships with your competitors if you can. Also, take a look at your sales comp plan, and that's a little bit off the agenda. But at least make sure you're compensating your salespeople for doing the right things at the right time. All right. Lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about reshoring. What does reshoring mean? It's come to mean returning manufacturing work to the United States from overseas, primarily China. It was beginning to happen in the late 2010s. COVID accelerated that movement. And so did the little picture on the right, which you might recognize as the Evergreen or whatever that boat was called that got stuck in the Suez Canal, which tied up $9 billion of trade per day. Total of about, I think, $100 billion in trade was tied up by the time they got that thing out of there. So what are the factors behind it besides COVID? One is that the Chinese labor advantage is not as big now as it was then. 20 years ago, Chinese labor cost about a tenth of US labor. Now it costs up to half. Now, that's still a significant advantage. But if you have a product with a relatively low labor content in it, let's say 10%, then it doesn't mean as much as it used to be. And the lower your labor content is, the less a labor cost advantage will be. There are long supply chains. By long, I mean just in time. It takes a long time to put a product on a truck, get it to a port, get it through customs, get it onto the boat crosses the high seas, and then the whole process is reversed at the other end. You're generally talking on the order of 8 weeks, give or take. A lot of businesses can handle that, but there's a real danger. And the danger is that if there is bad quality for some reason, if there's a quality problem in your Chinese factory, and it's the kind of quality problem that won't be discovered until a customer finds it. Well, now you've got, now you've got 8 weeks, actually more than that, probably close to 12 weeks of inventory with that quality problem sitting in trucks and boats and ports and everything like that. That is a real problem. Another industry where these long supply chains are a problem are industries where the product life cycles are very fast. Probably the most extreme example is the fashion industry. Especially women's fashions go in and out of fashion in weeks. And it's hard to hit that. It's not to say it can't be done. It's done all the time, but it's a heck of a lot more difficult to do it from 12,000 miles away than it is from your backyard. A less extreme example would be a lot of consumer goods, diapers, for instance. There seems to be, for a relatively benign product, there seem to be an unending series of product enhancements, little bitty improvements, little printing and sensors and all kinds of stuff. The product life cycle in the diaper industry is 12 to 18 months. Well, 2 months of that, probably 3, are already spoken for in the supply chain if it's coming from China. Another issue that has been well documented, particularly in China, is theft of intellectual property. There are some really complex rules. They're mostly unwritten about how you have to share ownership or managership of your company out in China. It leaves intellectual property pretty exposed. And the court system, the patent system in China is not as strong as it is here. And there are myriad examples of intellectual property literally being stolen. Another wild card is tariffs. There's been a lot of up and down with tariffs in the last 4 years. It's slowed down a little bit, but it's not to say that it won't kick up again. And those could add significantly to your costs. And along with that, it's not that hard to get mixed up in various geopolitical events. You never know when something in Syria or Afghanistan or Taiwan or whatever is going to kick off blockades or more tariffs or whatever is going on. Now, all that being said, we're not talking about a mass exodus here, and for those trade publications and newspapers and such that say, this is going to be a rebirth of American manufacturing, and the industry is going to double and all that. I don't think that's going to happen. It's not that easy to do, but if your product has a high degree of intellectual property, if it has anything to do with healthcare or medical security, that's a candidate. Anything with short product life cycles is a candidate. And anything that falls into the realm of national defense is also a candidate. The ITAR restrictions are becoming really quite strict. You'll see it particularly in defense, in aerospace, and to some degree in medical. It's getting to the point now where even you have to be careful about where you store your data in the cloud, because if your cloud provider is doing backups to overseas servers, that is a violation of ITAR. And there's a long story behind that, which I won't get into. In any case, it's not a fast process and it's not an easy process. It sometimes requires new facilities, and it also may require requalifications in industries like aerospace, defense, and medical and auto. You can move the same machines, the same products, everything. You can move the whole thing from China to the US, but your customer may or may not accept it without a series of trials, qualifications, validations, IQ, OQ, PQ, and all the rest of that. Depends on the customer, it depends on the industry. But the point is that reshoring is going to be done strategically and in relatively small doses. It will be enough to make a difference, but it won't be enough to change the landscape. So how do you take advantage of it? Well, first of all, stay close to your customers and understand their plans. Ask them straight out, are you going to be reshoring? Keep informed. One little trick I'll share is to get to know the consulates, including the American consulates overseas. And the reason is that when companies are moving, it doesn't matter from what country to which country, they often get the help of their consulates because they don't know how to do business, or they may have all kinds of questions about how to do something, and regulations and taxes and labor law and all the rest of that. And lots of times they will ask their consulate for help. And that's part of what a consulate does. So they are a great source of inside information as to who's moving around. And I highly recommend getting to know the consulates in this area. There's a ton of them in Boston and New York, and also the American consulates overseas. And make sure you understand the new skills and capabilities that you may need, because you may not have them and your customers may not have them here in the States. So how can MassMEP and Business Improvement Group help you? And I know Lisa's going to be talking about this toward the end of the webinar, but we can help you audit your supply chains and your supply chain processes. We can recommend simple process changes. Almost always they don't involve capital expenditures. They are really and truly process changes. They often involve information systems. MassMEP can provide you with a ton of training, and we can to a lesser extent. And between us, we can also help you with deeper dive projects and various research. Lastly, quick pitch. John and I are two of the three partners with Business Improvement Group. We've got over 100 years of operational experience. We've both all run companies. We've done turnarounds. We have no junior staff. We provide really a full suite of services to manufacturers ranging from 1 million up to 200 million, including full-scale turnarounds. But since we've all run companies, we're all comfortable with all the functions in a company, and we can help you no matter what you need. And we pride ourselves on not sitting in conference rooms and writing you a big fancy report. We're on the floor of the plant getting stuff done. So with that and a picture of our handsome mugs, I will turn it back over to the folks at MassMEP unless there are questions.
All right, I don't see any questions in there. So usually that's a good thing, Josh. That usually means that you've done a very good job covering over everything. But there may be some questions now that once Lisa, she's going to kind of bridge the gap and let everybody know why we're here. So let me share your presentation for you, Lisa, and then we'll get
Thanks, Haley.
you can get started. Hold on one second. I gotta move you. I gotta move you over here so I can do this the right way. My apologies. Okay. Here we go. All right. How does that look? Can you see the full screen
Yes,
or the
we
presenter
can.
view?
We're seeing the
It's
next
actually,
slide.
yeah, the presenter view.
Okay. Give me 1 second. How about, oh,
There
about
we
now?
go. Yep.
Good. All right, Lisa, it's all yours.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad that you've joined us here today, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, a way to get your training needs funded and get some work done with MassMEP and with the Business Improvement Group and that kind of thing. And this is through the Workforce Training Fund grants that are available through the state of Massachusetts, most specifically Commonwealth Corporation. These training grants are available for businesses of all sizes, but they do focus specifically on small to medium-sized businesses and getting some help out that way. The funding for these grants actually comes when you pay into the unemployment tax system in the state. So it's actually, you're getting your own money back in a way, and it's a wonderful opportunity to take care of. And I found that a lot of companies are not aware of the amount of funding that is available to them through the workforce training grants. And there's two predominant kinds of grants that are available. One is the general grant. The general grant is usually for when you're thinking about your long-term strategic goals and wanting to work on workforce development issues and things like that, because those funds are available for over a 2-year time frame. So usually you put together a pretty comprehensive training program when you're applying for a general grant. And again, these funds are available for businesses of all sizes. You can apply for up to $250,000 of training under the general grant program. That doesn't mean that you should apply for all 250. You should apply for what you need according to your strategic plans, but that's a lot of money that is available to you. And you don't have to provide any money or any sort to get this particular grant. These funds are, some people say it's sort of free money, and again, it's not really free money because you've already paid into the DUA system for these funds, but your investment into the training is your one-to-one match of employee time. Okay, so when your employees are in training, they will be being paid their regular wages, and so whatever that calculates up to is what the match is all about. And so if you apply for a $50,000 grant, then you need to be providing $50,000 in salary match in order to qualify for that grant. There is actually a minimum on these grants. That minimum is $10,000. So you need to be applying for at least a $10,000 grant, anywhere between $10,000 and $250,000. With a general grant, the planning time and application time can take you a little bit. You got to do some work. You've got to prep your KPIs, and MassMEP is here to help you with that process. We have a long history of helping companies with that process. And there are some real benefits to applying for a general grant. However, right now, as of July 1st, the Express program has made some significant changes. And this program is, you know, sort of the, for your immediate training needs, your short-term needs, for spot training and that kind of thing. And the changes that they have made are now that businesses of any size can participate in the Express program. They made that change recently, but in addition to that, what they have just done is made it so that if you have 100 or fewer employees, you get 100% reimbursement for your training, which is phenomenal. And if you are a business with more than 100 employees, you're going to get a 50% reimbursement. It used to be that if you had more than 100 employees, you weren't even eligible for the Express program, but now you are. The Express program is a different limit to the funding. The grant funds are $30,000 per company per calendar year, and up to $3,000 per employee per course. Okay. And so one of the things that means is, starting as of July 1st, that means if you had not applied for any Express training this year, between July now and December 31st, you qualify for $30,000. And then again in January, you will qualify for another $30,000. Now, if you have applied for an Express grant this year, starting in 2021, then, you know, let's say you had applied for $10,000, then you would still have a $20,000 amount that you could apply for in an Express grant. Haley, next slide. Next slide, Haley. Huh. Haley, next slide, please.
Yeah, is it not? It's not
yeah,
moving forward?
It's not doing anything.
Oh, how about now?
It's a good thing I
Hold on.
talked a lot about that one slide then.
Hang on one. How about this, Lise? How's that?
Yeah, okay. That's perfect. Thank you,
There we
Haley.
go. Sorry about that.
So this is a massive eye chart that kind of goes over the differences between the general grant and the Express grant. And I did talk a lot about these during the previous comments that I had made. So who can apply? We've already talked about that. What must a company contribute? We've talked about that. What can be paid for using the grant funds? That's a great question. So we were focusing primarily today on the Express grant. And in the Express grant, there is a directory that you choose your training from. It's sort of considered to be more off the shelf training. Whereas in the general grant, you can choose your own vendors. It doesn't have to come specifically from that directory. We've already talked about the grant limits. And then in the next block down, how to apply, this is the link that takes you to the Workforce Training Fund, where you can open an application. However, as I mentioned, we are available to help walk you through the process for either of these types of grants. We also included the link to get a certificate of good standing, because that's actually the first step for any grant that you apply for, either the general grant or the Express grant. And I love it because Massachusetts actually has 2 certificates of good standing, not to confuse things any, but you want the one from the Department of Revenue. And it's free to apply for that one. The other certificate of good standing that's available through the state actually costs you like $12 or something. So if you're having to pay for it, you're trying to get the wrong one. Just that note there. In terms of deadlines and turnaround times, the general grants are done on a rolling basis, and it usually takes up to 60 days for them to process the grant once it's been received. Whereas with the Express grant, again, hence the name Express, again, this is also on a rolling basis, but usually turnaround time in 21 days. You don't want to start any of your training in either one of these cases prior to having been approved and contracted. So once you get your approval email, don't just jump and think, oh, good, I can get started now. Wait till you're contracted, and then you can jump and get going. And the selection process, again, there's review teams that go over these grants, and they are very detailed in their reviews. So you want to pay attention to the details that you're putting into your grant, because they will ask you questions. And again, at MassMEP, we have a lot of background in doing these, so we try to make that process as seamless as possible for you. The length of the training period, for both of these, the training must be accomplished in a 24-month period. And if it's done sooner than that, that's okay too. Next slide, Haley. So focusing in more on the Express grant, the things that you would probably want to do before you even go to open the application is go and look at that Express grant directory, which is available on the Workforce Training Fund website, and look at the courses and see which ones it is that you want to pick, and write down the course number that's associated with that and the title of that training. And then you want to make sure that you have your certificate of good standing available. You will be required to upload that right away. They also ask you for your FEIN number, and I believe they ask you for your DUA number as well. So then you can go ahead and open that application and fill in the information. Now, here's the thing about the Express grant. Again, the name is so apt for this grant, because we just worked with a client last week doing one of these applications, and it took 23 minutes. You got to love that. And then you wait to hear from them, and they will let you know within that 21-day time frame about getting your award. So once you've been awarded and contracted, then you can conduct your training. And once the training is conducted and you've paid the trainer and you have your invoice, that's when you can send in and request your reimbursement for the training. Next slide, Haley. Hey, you're on a roll now. That's awesome. Okay, so the contact people, if you're interested in looking at some grants here, is Mike Herbert, who is also on this call here today, is the primary point of contact for the Work with Business Improvement Group. And I'm happy to also answer any questions about the grant process for you. Other than that, if you have questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you. And I see Haley has uploaded the link to the Workforce Training Fund Express grant directory there in the chat function for you, so that you don't have to go looking for it yourself.
Yep. All right, Mike, do you want to maybe tell everybody why I put that link in there, as to now how we're going to bridge this gap between why Business Improvement Group was on with us today and why Lisa just spoke to the importance of the workforce training funds?
Yes, sure. Well, firstly, thank you everyone for attending. Those of you attending as registered or attending Facebook Live, thank you very much for joining in. I will be a point of contact for those that registered to answer any questions, and I will reach out to each of you. As Josh and Lisa said, we have partnered with the Business Improvement Group, Josh Sherman and John Malone, with this product that's in our standard listing called Supply Chain Management. It is available in the grant funding, whether it's in an express grant program or along the general grant programs, if you'd like to include it for a larger period of your training. We'd be glad to assist you with that. I have included my contact information in the chat for those of you to reach out to me, or please feel free to reach out to Lisa with any questions, but I'd be glad to assist you along the way.
All right, well, I think that about covers it. We didn't have any questions, so I just take comfort in knowing that we've done such an excellent job today in presenting all this information that nobody has any questions. We do want to thank Josh and John for being on with us this morning, and also thanks to our team members, Lisa, Mike, and Emma. Emma's staring me from the background, yelling at me on mute, saying, "Can you hear Lisa? Can you hear Lisa?" So I apologize that we got a little backed up there with that that presentation. I was clicking forward, but for some reason it just wasn't working. So that's why I got on the roll for the last three for you, Lise. So you should be good to go. But yeah, if anybody does have any questions, again, please feel free. Their contact information. Mike will be following up with everyone after the webinar within the next 24 to 36 hours, just to reach out and say hello. Do you have any questions? And again, like we had said, we are still on Facebook Live, and so that you will all receive a thank you confirmation email for attending the webinar, and it will have the link in there for you to access the Facebook page. So if there's anyone else that you feel would benefit from watching this and learn a little bit more about what we do offer for Business Improvement Group in our Workforce Training Fund program and the Express Grant program, please send them to the Facebook page, and then also they'll be able to get our contact information there. So we're going to give everybody an extra 10 minutes. Don't worry, we will not let your team members or supervisors know that we let you out 10 minutes early. You'll get a 10-minute extra long lunch today. So thanks everyone for attending, and we will see everybody next time. Okay.